Oh boy, look at this! It's a historical slice of life about this super energetic kid set in 1333 in the city of Kamakura. I'm sure we'll get to see him grow up and live happily ever after, since nothing bad could ever happen in this particular year. I mean, it's the shogunate seat of power, and it's not like they oppressed the emperor for a century or anything, all the while gathering tons of powerful enemies. Oh wait. As you may have gathered from that short excerpt, this is one of those historical narratives that I love so much, and for once it's not even faux historical, sort of, we'll get to that in a bit. Coming in surprisingly low on the seasonal rankings on MAL, well, low for Cloverworks production anyway, the Elusive Samurai was unfortunately overshadowed by the likes of Oshinoko's second season, and even the Suicide Squad isekai, as terrible as that was. I say unfortunately, as this is one of those hidden gems that get trampled underfoot by some pretty songs and flashing lights, and while people across social media have been obsessing over the shock value of the gorier scenes, the show has so much more to offer. I mean, it does come with a lot of gore as well, like, a lot. But therein lies the beauty of the anime. Originally written by Yusei Matsui, the man behind Assassination Classroom, the Elusive Samurai balances on a knife's edge of light-hearted and over-the-top humor with some almost slice-of-lifey elements, and the brutal realities of existence in such a tumultuous time in Japanese history. Following the story of the young prodigy of the Hojo clan, Hojo Tokiyuki, the 8-year-old prince is the pinnacle of shogunate pride. A steadfast leader who is dedicated to his studies and ready to one day lead the nation to a better future. Just kidding, he runs away from any and all responsibilities, quite literally, while hoping that he does not end up like his old man, a puppet leader drugged out of his mind and controlled by the court officials. Luckily for the little princeling though, in a real monkey's paw moment of careful what you wish for, his own mentor and the most trusted general of the shogunate, Ashikaga Takauji, chooses this very moment to do a switcheroo of loyalties, betray the shogun, march on Kamakura and put the city to the sword in the name of the emperor. And so begins one of the most unhinged and downright gorgeous revenge stories in anime history, full of stupid jokes, periodically correct animal abuse, and a whole lot of sexual tension between a pervy guard and a young boy. That last one may have been a joke. May have. The tone of the anime can be roughly summarized as what the f***. Jumping from the public execution of a child to frolicking happily on a field, you might be forgiven for thinking that everything in the Elusive Samurai is totally unhinged, because it is, and yet I can't help but to love it. The anime not only follows the young Lord Hojo in exile as he struggles with his own feelings of inadequacy and with his protector, the somewhat eccentric self-proclaimed deity Suwa Yorishige, but also delves into the political upheaval following the dissolution of the Kamakura shogunate. It offers some of the most inventive yet believable historical storytelling out there, and I feel like that was the original goal all along. The ending of the Kamakura period, the Kenmu restoration, and the formation of the Muromachi Bakufu are significant events in Japanese history, and yet they are all relatively obscure elsewhere in the world, and this is the way you get people interested in your history. Well, other than the Sengoku period at least. All that may sound rather lofty and somewhat unorthodox for an anime, but at the end of the day, this is still a shonen, and you might even call it a battle shonen. Not necessarily in the traditional sense, but a shonen nonetheless. And yet, Gon is the great shonen template in the sky that the vast majority of shows in the genre follow. Instead of Demon Slayer, the Elusive Samurai has far more in common with something like Mob Psycho. It's that inward look into oneself and search for value as a person, but rather than the troubles of modern society and fitting in, Tokiyuki is faced with a world that would have his head on a spike for the high crime of continuing to breathe. The first few episodes set the precedent for what is to follow, although beat in a somewhat rushed manner, after the speedrunning consisting of a lot of dead people and one slain shogun, along with whatever this is. Things slow down significantly, and while the young Lord Hojo is still fighting for his right to have his head firmly affixed to the rest of him, the anime is far more focused on his growth as a person than it is on the sword-swingy fighty bits. It's a story that isn't afraid to take its time and stretch the usual half an episode long training montage into an entire arc in order to firmly establish its characters and make sure you care about them. Well, maybe not Yorishige, but I digress. I fully realize that if you are not a fan of slice of life, putting it into words like this, an entire season's worth of training and just existing, might sound insanely boring, and there is very little I can say to convince you otherwise, mainly because you are right. It does sound roughly as interesting as watching an isekai fan trying to convince you that the millionth fantasy world with the exact same skills and rules is somehow new and exciting. But trust me on this one. The anime perfectly blends historical events, comedy, and incredible characters into a story that can be only described as captivating. Tokiyuki himself is the polar opposite of your typical shonen protagonist, being timid and unsure of himself, but before you know it he develops his own style of fighting and you begin to see that the boy is potentially far more damaged by the traumatic experiences of the recent past than he might have initially seemed. I mean, how else do you explain him laughing in a shower of blood? The kid's totally messed up in the head. He also gathers a group of equally strange but unique retainers, from the inhumanly strong Binjo to the pervy thief and Mr. Eat Everything That Moves, along with other rather colourful characters, both friend and foe. That, and it being based on real historical events with the essence of the supernatural woven in, makes for an interesting combination that reminds me of Studio Ghibli-like storytelling. Don't get me wrong, the Elusive Samurai is not Miyazaki levels of perfection, but it is easily one of, if not the best representation of feudal Japan we have in anime form. And as a final cherry on top, the production. Well, it's Cloverworks, isn't it? Be it Bocchi the Rock, Spy X Family, or even The Promised Neverland, you can rely on the studio to produce absolute visual masterpieces, and this time they overdid even themselves. Yes, well, not everything can be perfect now, can it? As a general rule of thumb, the anime looks amazing, with godlike detail and especially the shading and backgrounds in ostensibly meaningless scenes make everything pop on a whole other level, and when you start to think that this is the pinnacle of what the studio can produce, they hit you with a dozen different styles of action and art style all at once in a constant stream of pure eye candy that puts any and all other studios to shame. And then you get to episode 4 and the CGI hits like an angry French farmer with a tractor full of horse. It's fairly obvious that they either ran out of budget or time to do this again, and normally I wouldn't have minded that much if it weren't for the faces. Facial expressions and over-exaggerated features are a major selling point in the show's unique style, but a face like Ogasawara Sadamune's just turns into nightmare fuel when put into CG. It's those cold, dead Ubisoft eyes all over again, but turned up to 11. It's not a deal breaker, especially when the rest of the show looks as good as it does, but it is still more than a little jarring. What isn't jarring though, and I can't believe I'm saying this, is the comedy. It's dumb and it works. What do you want me to say? The creepy feudal Gojo Satoru is funny, okay? The humor is mostly super out of place and weird, and I find that funny. Is it Golden Kamui wank battle out of place and weird? Hell no, but it is a fitting kind of weird. When one of your major themes includes the bad guys doing all the funny things people do to each other when given too much power, use your imagination, I am not getting this video demonetized. Anyway, people are horrible, and when it is this on the nose, you are going to need something to balance the scales a little, unless you want to become as samey as Attack on Titan's later seasons were. Blood, gore and despair is only shocking when it's not a constant, and in that Elusive Samurai succeeds so goddamn well. It works because it's so out of place, because the violence is so over the top, and because Tokiyuki is not your typical shonen main dude, and because his retainers, while strong, are still kids and need to rely on one another to succeed, and because... But I have waffled on for far too long. The moral of the story is, for my money, the Elusive Samurai is the best this season has to offer, and more people need to watch it. Not that my less than 2,000 subs ass talking about it much helps, but still, every little bit counts. And you never know, maybe this video goes viral and jumpstarts the channel or something, who knows. Oh, and closing words. This is a historical narrative, as I have said ad nauseum, but it's a fairly accurate one at that. So the threat of being like me and moseying on over to Google to look at the historical counterparts of the characters and being massively spoiled is a very real one. You have been warned. But even so, there is so much hidden in the anime in reference to the real history, like the period-correct animal abuse being something Ogasawara promoted as a true test of a master, and Tokiyuki being given the demon-slaying blade Onimaru in the very episode where his opponent shows the signs of becoming an Oni. Just something to keep in mind. Anyway, with that, thank you for watching, and an especially big thanks to my channel members, RC Rally, Speedy Boy, and Mr. Shadow. If you enjoyed this, I ask you to sacrifice your time a little longer and do the YouTube things of liking and commenting and sharing, as every interaction satisfies the algorithm god's hunger a little more. If you really enjoyed this, you can also subscribe for more anime goodness, as we are closing in on that 2K. And if you generally make bad financial decisions, you can also become a channel member and join the aforementioned illustrious trio, or not, up to you. Anyway, with this, I have been Cheese, and I'll see you next time. Ta-ta for now.